Warning, this episode may contain content that is not suitable for children. Viewer discretion is advised.
And there were many times where directors would say things like, pray to the theater gods, invite them to come to you and give you the energy that you need to do this performance.
Good evening, godless sodomites.
Kneel before your God, Babylon!
Making me the highest paid megalomaniacal boy king in all of Babylon!
You see, if you go and visit the very home of the Oscars where they hold it each year, you can see a plaque on the wall that says the Babylonian Court. The camera shows you the stage and you see an unmistakable Tower of Babel embedded into the design. Outside of the Kodak Theater, you have the gate to Ishtar, and you have Babylonian gods put on the outside of the gate. They have the exact elephants. They have the same exact gate of Ishtar. They have the same exact Babylonian gods over the top of the gates.
Did any of them have any, and this is probably way off, have any type of altars or any type of thing that they had set up in their own little, maybe their own little trailer, maybe a separate corner? I've heard about this happening throughout history, where not just in acting, but even in some well-known heists that have happened. I read a story just the other day about these bank robbers. They had set up this altar, and they believed it gave them special privilege to go get this money. And when they would go out, they were finally able to stop these guys. And this is I realize this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but I'm coming back. They were able to stop these guys because they finally figured out where their car was. And they ended up being able to shoot all the FBI by going around in the circle, and one guy was able to stop them because he shot them in the neck. But they found out that all the FBI had riddled them through with bullets, but these guys kept going. One even went through the aorta, but they kept going and they shot several. It's a horrible story, but it's a well-known documented story where they went back, they said, how are these guys able to do this? And that these guys were able to do this because they had an altar and they were praying to these gods of war.
Those deputies were able to tell me that the only thing they found at this place was they found a little altar that was a pagan sort of Norse god altar, and it appeared that these two individuals had, at that time, they did some kind of sacrifice to some evil spirits from the Norse mythology. There was something to do with berserker spirits, and so I told them, I said, that's it. That's how they did what they did. They did some kind of sacrifice, and these whatever it was, the god of mischief that they did these sacrifices to. I think it was called Loki, and to the berserker spirits. And they were given these berserker spirits, whatever they are. They were given that in order to accomplish what they did, and that's what they did. They had a complete dedication on a spiritual level that inhabited them, came to them, and helped them to do these extraordinary feats that they did.
Loki, specifically.
Interesting.
And they said it has some spiritualism that had something to do with it, and they closed the case as a paranormal case. So it was interesting, but there is something spiritual that is absolutely inside, and that can happen to actors, and you can't deny it.
Absolutely, yeah. The entire theater is just filled with spiritualism, for sure, right? Yeah. Like, I think of Heath Ledger, who, as you may remember, he played the Joker in The Dark Knight, and you might remember that he had a tragic end to his life after his serious commitment to his character. I mean, he would lock himself in his hotel room for weeks on end with little to no sleep, and he would be drawing crazy pictures and making crazy notes in this diary. And there's
dark things.
Right, dark things that you would expect from somebody who's going through serious mental illness. And what happened is a lot of people are skeptical, did he kill himself or not? But his last words in his diary were bye-bye. And a lot of his castmates would often say that he threw himself on the walls of the set just to make his injuries look more realistic for his character. Wow. And so I think that is the level of commitment that every actor and actress aspires to, even in the small scale productions that I was part of. I mean, we took ourselves very seriously.
Yeah, he was a method actor, and he actually would show up on set, if I remember this correctly, would not break character.
Yes.
And in fact, I remember reading articles with the other cast members that were on this character and said he was downright scary. When he would show up, you just felt like this dark presence that was with him.
My one experience with Heath on the film was our scene together in the hospital bed, which is really my only scene with him. And it was, I was in the hospital bed that day, and I thought, well, I don't really have any lines. What am I gonna do? And I had no idea what was gonna happen. And so I got in the bed, and they were lighting, and Chris was walking around and doing things, and then Heath came around, and Heath was always in character. So he would come around and, you know, be talking to himself in the corner, like this. And then he would come up, I was laying there, and I was watching him the whole time. And he came up and would walk around me like this. And I would watch him, and I would watch him. He'd walk around the hospital bed like this. I'd watch him. Didn't say anything for maybe an hour. He would walk around. And then we'd watch him, and then he'd start saying his lines. And I would watch him, boom, watch him come around the bed like this. And then all of a sudden my hand would go up like this, and he caught my hand. So we just went through this organic process of developing this scene, which was really nothing. And then when we came time to shoot, we had this thing beautifully choreographed, and you know, we never said a word to each other.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it was a long day, and we walked out back to our trailers, and Heath was here, and I was walking, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, "That's what acting's all about."
I think, you know, I saw little pieces of evidence where it's like when he met with Christopher Nolan and talked about doing this performance, he said, "I have a trick up my sleeve." And, you know, there's lots of videos of Christopher Nolan talking about this experience, but he called him like, "What is it that you have?" And I honestly think that he was messing around with invoking spirits, and he pulled something inside of him that literally made him go insane.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because I was actually taught the same method that he used in his acting. It's called the Stanislavski method. And basically, to sum it up, it's the art of experiencing. And so it really recommends that you become one with your character. Essentially, my directors would constantly tell us things like, invite your character in, empty yourself, and let your character live out their life in you.
Mm-hmm. I took an acting class that was centered around this kind of theology, the method. And what was very interesting was he would have us actually come into the class, and we would do actions that we would do on a daily basis, like let's say just taking a shower. So you shower, if you ever paid attention to your showering, in a very sequential order that you pretty much do every single day. Mm-hmm. Then he would disrupt that, and he'd say, you need to now have your character shower, and you need to let that character shower like he would shower. And then we would do wacky things like this, so that it was like basically training your brain to like stop being you and be this other person. It's really, I think, opening doors.
But this is at all levels, and it's wrong on all levels. And that someone might view this with Heath Ledger as an extreme case, but there are other cases. We talked about Michael B. Jordan and how it was hard for him to disassociate from Killmonger.
So it was no real plan. I didn't have an escape plan either. You know, I wanted to be in this lonely place as long as I could in order to kind of capture the essence of what Eric, Stevens was, what Killmonger was. So when we wrapped the film, I'm like, in my mind, I was like, okay, cool, go back to, regular life, get back to LA and be cool. But it was a little tough for me at first to kind of like accept that.
It was hard just to lay him down and be done with it.
Yeah.
How did it take you a while?
It took me, I don't really know exactly when I came out of it, but I went to therapy, I started talking to people, started unpacking a little bit.
There's a man who played Elvis. Even to this day is still talking with the accent of Elvis. He can't remember who he was before he totally immersed himself into that character.
And lastly, Elvis Presley himself. You were an icon and a rebel, and I love you so much.
Irene Bartlett, Austin's voice coach, recently chatted with Australia's ABC Gold Coast on Monday, and she addressed how the actor's voice permanently changed since playing such an iconic role. telling the outlet because of COVID shutdowns, he was working on it all the time, and it's difficult to switch off something you've spent so much focus and time on. Irene continued on defending her students' technique and said it wasn't being done for show, adding, "What you saw in that 2023 Golden Globe speech, that's him. It's genuine. It's not put on. I feel sorry people are saying that, you know? It's still acting, but he's actually taken the voice on board. I don't know how long that will last or if it's going to be there forever."
Jim Carrey had a very difficult time stopping being, what was the comedian that he played? Andy Kaufman. In fact, when he played the Grinch, he would not show up some days, and Ron Howard would be like, "Hey dude, aren't you gonna come to work? You know, everybody's out here with the lights on and everything." And he'd say, "Well, Jim Carrey's not here." And he'd be like, "Well, who's there?" And he'd be like, "Andy Kaufman." "Well, will you please send Andy Kaufman out to do the scene?" And literally he'd do the scene as Andy Kaufman.
When Man in the Moon came out, there was all this talk about the process that you went through when you became Andy Kaufman, essentially. Did you ever have it in the back of your mind back then that you wanted to share that story in this way that you're getting to do now?
Yeah, and I thought I had become Andy Kaufman, but there was no me actually at the end of it all. I realized that there was, that this character was making choices to play a character, and so that's what kind of happened, and that's what Chris found in this interview and in this footage, that there was actually a existential, not a crisis, but a discovery going on,
Because he couldn't stop, like there was a blurred line between where he began and the character he just played.
I remember Jim Carrey going out to that one show and saying, "Who are we really? I don't even know who I am. I don't know what is Jim Carrey."
I can relate to that so much. There were so many times throughout my childhood that I thought, I actually don't even have a clue who I am. I'm all these other people, but who is Ashley? And I couldn't answer that. And I think of the verse John 17:21, which says, when Jesus prayed that they may all be one, as you, Father, are in me and I in you, and that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that you sent me. So it's Christ that wants us to be one with him. And if there's anything else that we're trying to be one with, then I think that's very problematic.
Yeah.